The use of indentured and contract labor on a global scale began between the mid-1820s and the early 1840s as part of a Great Britain's Great Experiment to demonstrate the superiority of free over slave labor. The indentured and contract labor system that developed and existed between 1826 and 1946 involved the immigration of more than 5 million workers from Africa, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the South Pacific throughout the former plantation world and beyond, with a total of 69 countries, former colonies, and territories. Mauritius was the crucial test case in the use of indentured labor, where 462,800 immigrant men, women, and children were introduced, and the success of the system in Mauritius led other colonies and countries to rely on indentured immigrant labor as well. Between the 1840s and the 1920s, indentured and contract laborers were also taken to work in Reunion Island, Natal in South Africa, Fiji in the South Pacific Ocean, and Queensland in Australia, and Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname.
In April 1828, the ship the Turquoise brought the first Indian indentured workers to Reunion Island from South India. Between 1828 and 1936, more than 200,000 indentured laborers were brought to work on the island's plantations, and they were Mozambicans, other East Africans, Malagasies, Comorians, Indians, some Mauritians, Vietnamese, and some South Pacific Islanders. Most among them were landed, registered, and provided accommodation at the Grand Chaloupe before being distributed and taken to work mainly on the sugar estates. During the mid-19th century, the colony of Natal in South Africa faced a labor shortage because of the local African population's unwillingness to work on European-owned sugar plantations. In 1859, the Natal government arranged for labor to be imported from India, and in November 1860, the first batch of 342 indentured Indian laborers landed in Durban. Indentured Indians also worked in other regions of what would become modern South Africa. More than 150,000 indentured Indian laborers were brought to South Africa between 1860 and 1911. The first Indian indentured laborers reached Fiji in 1879 on the ship the Leonidas. During the late 1870s, Sir Arthur Gordon, the first British governor, had the experience in other British plantation colonies, Trinidad and Tobago and Mauritius, and initiated the introduction of indentured workers from India. Some 63,000 Indian workers reached Fiji before the local indenture system ended in 1917. British Guyana first imported indentured Indian workers in May 1838 when 396 hill coolies from northern India arrived from Calcutta. Between the late 1830s and the 1910s, around 238,000 Indians reached this small South American colony. Between the 1840s and 1870s, tens of thousands of indentured Chinese, Africans, and Portuguese workers were introduced to supplement the Indian workforce on the sugar plantations. By 1917, the last Indian immigrants reached Guyanese shores. In 1806, hundreds of Chinese indentured workers were brought to work on the plantations Trinidad and Tobago. However, this labor experiment proved to be a dismal failure. In 1845, the first Indian immigrants were brought to this Caribbean island. From 1845, to 1917, around 145,000 Indian indentured men, women, and children were landed in Trinidad and Tobago, with many of them being registered and housed at Nelson Island. The indentured system lasted there until the 1910s. In 1863, slavery was abolished in Suriname, and the local planters were in dire need of labor for the sugar estates. A decade later, in 1873, Indian indentured workers were brought to this small Dutch colony in northern South America. Over 37,000 Indians were recruited until the early 1900s. Just like in Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, thousands of Africans, Europeans, and Chinese were also brought to Surinamese shores to labor on the sugar plantations. The indentured labor system lasted there until the 1920s.
Between 1826 and 1946, this truly global movement of these millions of indentured and contract workers from sub-Saharan Africa, Australasia, East Asia, Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia was an integral part of the development of a modern world in which we live. Those who traversed the length and breadth of a colonial world as a result of a system carried their cultural, linguistic, religious, and social traditions with them. Traditions that contributed to the creation of a rich, multicultural societies that form part of their legacy not only to their sons and daughters, but also to the rest of us in Mauritius and in other parts of the world like Reunion Island, South Africa, Australia, Fiji, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname.